Chapter 36 Bancroft House, Somerset, England, June 22nd, 1889. Athena stirred, awoken by the harsh ringing in her ears. He squeezed his eyes shut, longing for the comfort of his blissfully dreamless sleep. His memories felt fuzzy and his mind packed with cotton. Everything ached. They stretched, shifting slightly beneath the warm sheets. Something moved beside their leg under the covers, slithering snake-like around their limbs. Athena froze, waiting for more movement. Nothing came. Had they imagined it? They were hit in the head, they remembered vaguely. Was it some kind of head trauma-induced hallucination? He had been hit. Yes, hard, it seemed. She was sure they had been hit by... sherbet? Yes, it had been sherbet. The chemist had said it was for their own good, but... As Athena thought, their muscles tensed, and they felt the twitching around their legs yet again. He opened his eyes, eyelids scratchy and heavy. He was in Bancroft House again. The room had become familiar to him now, but it still didn't feel like his own. There was nothing resting on the sheets, which were tangled across her legs. No visible shapes on the folds. You're awake. Athena jumped, jerking her head upwards to see Seven in the corner of the room. Athena's throat was too dry to speak, and they let out a soft, whimpering groan. Seven approached with a glass held in his spindly fingers and offered it to them. I was told to prepare water for your awakening. Athena reached out a hand. Pain shot across their shoulder at the movement, and their arm faltered for a moment before they grasped the glass shakily. What? He croaked, pulling himself up in the bed. What happened? Sherbet... Seven did not answer for a moment. You overexerted your abilities, they said finally. It was not a lie. It was just not the whole truth. You have been unconscious for approximately 5 days. Athena winced. Last time I was only out for 3. Seven nodded. Indeed. My medical examination, along with the opinion of Master Misvale, has concluded that this exertion was considerably more taxing than your previous outburst. To use the words of Master Misvale, your mortal body is not yet strong enough to house the immortal power within. It was concluded that another exertion too soon could potentially be fatal. Athena ran a heavy tongue across the inside of her dry mouth, coated in an ashy-tasting film. Fatal? He rasped, taking another sip of water. I didn't want to do it at all, Seven, and I... Sherbet, he said stiffly. I need to see Sherbet. They're not... Athena moved to stand, but Seven stepped forward quickly, holding up his hands. I would not recommend rising. Along with several wounds, you have recently exhibited the further transformation of your physical traits, which you may find alarming. Athena pressed their tongue around their sharp teeth. A hand drifted up to their ears, fingers gently running along its pointed tip, protruding from their auburn hair. Athena pushed themselves out of bed and almost stumbled forwards, except... Their weight seemed to shift as they felt the sheets drag behind them. Athena rested forwards on their toes, crouched to catch themselves. Only they never fell further. They remained hunched and balanced in a way that didn't make sense. He looked around and screamed. A tail stretched out from their back, long and thin, trailing along the ground. Athena tried to jerk away from it and crashed into Seven, who held the youth firmly around the shoulders. Miss Athena. What? How? Why does... Athena thrashed against Seven's grip, trying to break loose as their tail whipped around frantically behind them. What's happening to me? Athena shoved Seven in the chest, and the automaton flew backwards, slamming into the wall with a crash. Athena screamed in surprise, looking at their hands. Their nails were long and sharp, and they could see their tendons and ligaments twitching with every slight movement, standing out beneath their tawny skin, which was stretched tight across their bones. A soft light filled her veins, making them glow red beneath her skin before fading away as the surge of power left them. Athena was crying again, and they could feel the opaque crystal tears forcing their way from their left eye and dropping to the ground. They had cried so much of late, more than they ever had in their life. They wanted to stop. They wanted all of this to stop. Athena twisted jerkily at their hip, staring down at his tail. The growth emerged from their lower back, pressing against the waistband of their pants as it snaked towards the floor. It was the color of their skin, covered with a barely noticeable layer of hair. Athena thought of the tail moving, and it gave an experimental flick. He felt the muscles in his back shift, in much the same way they would if he moved an arm, and he let out a sob, collapsing to his knees. Seven clunked as he stood upright, his arms outstretched. "Mix Athena, I urge you not to panic." Athena wrapped his arms around himself and bent over, sobbing at the floor, as if instinctually his tail wrapped around him, adding to his arm's embrace. "I don't want this, Seven. I want it to go away." Seven crouched beside the teen and nodded. "I understand." "No, you don't," Athena screamed, snapping back upright to stare at Seven in his lifeless blue eyes. "You don't understand anything. All you do is stand there and take orders, and you don't even think. You can't think, Seven, so don't tell me you understand, because you don't. You didn't have a life to be ruined in the first place." Athena shuddered. His energy had been entirely expelled in that final shout. "You didn't have a humanity to lose." Seven was quiet for a long time. He didn't know how to respond, and there was once again that sense of guilt he had felt when talking with Will. The feeling he didn't understand, but knew was there. It stemmed from the knowledge that he couldn't help, even if he was supposed to. If he wanted to. "I am sorry," Seven said quietly. "You are correct." Athena shook their head. No, I wasn't. I shouldn't. I didn't mean to hurt you, Seven. Your statements were accurate. You do not need to apologize. I cannot be hurt. I do not have feelings to be hurt," he said in an attempt to be comforting. Except Seven was no longer entirely sure if that was true. The fact was that it did hurt. He wasn't sure what that meant. Not understanding it, he elected to ignore it. "You're more human than anyone in this fucking house," Athena muttered. She closed her eyes, and she could see Sherbet leaning over her, eyes wild and teeth coated in purple. She could feel their hand in her hair and their fist slamming into her again and again, hurting him, breaking him. She saw David and Easton watching on as Sherbet screamed at him, their faces stained with purple veins. They saw all of them, all of this in crystal clarity for the first time since that night in London. "They're monsters," Athena said, before adding quietly, "We're monsters. All of us. Just maybe not in the same ways." Seven tilted his head, placing a hand on Athena's shoulder in what he hoped was a comforting gesture. "I do not entirely understand your sentiment." "They're not cured, are they, Seven?" Athena asked. "Sherbet was lying to me. They're still under Endyrion's control." Seven went to nod, but found his movements blocked by some unseen force. "That information is classified." Athena let out a laugh, which mingled with the sob in his throat. "Of course it is. They're just using me now that Ray's gone, aren't they? To open another portal. I I killed him, and now they're just using me up until I die too. Maybe I deserve it. That is not true, Seven said. He wanted to expand on that point. On what exactly wasn't true. The letter he had read told him that Ray was very much alive, and Jamie too, only Will had classified the contents of the letter. You do not deserve it, they said in place of the classified information. I'm a monster, Seven. Not just the tail and the ears. I hurt so many people. The people I cared about, and I just want them back. I want Jamie back. Athena leant into Seven's hand, allowing the automaton to support her weight. She took a shaky breath. This is all Sherwood's fault. Seven straightened up as Athena pushed away from them and stood up. Pardon? Athena walked shakily towards the door, using the wall to steady themselves. If Sherbet hadn't forced me to... If I hadn't done what I did then, I wouldn't be like this. He threw open the door, lumbering barefoot through the halls of the house. His tail was new, and the flicking movement of it behind him threw him off balance, causing him to constantly stumble and catch himself on walls or tables. Sherbet! Athena howled, throwing open doors in the expansive manor house. Sherbet! Athena threw open a final door into the large dining room and found more than she was bargaining for. Sherbet, David, and Easton stood arranged around a table, leaning over an impressively sized map. All three of them wheeled around to face the youth as they burst through the door, catching themselves on the doorframe and hunching to catch their breath. Look who's finally awake, Easton smiled. They were sitting sideways across a chair, their legs propped on the table, and of the three assembled in the room, they seemed the least fazed by Athena's arrival. Indeed, Sherbet grinned. Welcome back to the land of the living. Athena was panting as he glared up at Sherbet with his mismatched eyes, which glowed as if lit by a fire deep within them. Pain was stabbing at his ribs and neck, and he could feel blood pulsing and swelling in the tender bruises which covered his face and shoulders. You lied to me, they growled. David scoffed. I told you this would happen. Quiet, Sherbet snapped at the man, who simply shrugged. And what exactly did I lie to you about, Athena? Athena stepped into the room hesitantly. You said you were cured, that Endirion wasn't controlling you anymore, but that's not true, is it? She's been using you this whole time, and you've been using me. Athena went to throw themselves at Sherbet, staggering towards the scientist. In a series of movements so quick Athena's rage-filled mind barely registered them, Sherbet had drawn something from their coat, which they pressed hard into Athena's forehead as they approached, stopping the teen in their tracks. Now, Athena. Don't try anything you might regret. Athena felt the cold barrel of a gun pressed to their forehead. She swallowed. When had Sherbet gotten it? Why had Sherbet gotten it? Sherbet, Athena muttered, their eyes crossed as they stared up at the glimmering weapon indenting their skin. That's what I thought, Sherbet growled. David, if you would kindly restrain our friend. Be careful of their new appendage. The chemist's grin twisted their face into a sickening mask of their once kind countenance. Athena found themselves blush despite their anger. He felt David's calloused hands grab him from behind, holding his arms in place. David was surprisingly gentle despite the inherent threat he was posing. We don't want to hurt you, Athena, David said, and from the tone of his voice she was almost tempted to believe him. Tell it to Sherbet, Athena scoffed, glaring up at the chemist. Believe me, David growled, turning his own gaze on Sherbet. I have. You're important, Athena. Very important. And we wouldn't want any harm to come to you. Athena ignored him, eyes still locked on Sherbet, who slowly drew the gun away from his skull. I trusted you, they spat. I trusted you and you lied to me. You beat me to the brink of death. Now you're just being dramatic, Sherbet drawled, rolling their eyes. You weren't going to die, Athena. I wouldn't let that happen. Stefan said, that another unleashed burst of energy from the nether may be fatal, yes, I know. But that was merely another exertion. If you properly control it, then it won't happen, will it? Sherbet smirked. All I had to do was give you a little bit of motivation to control your gifts. That way you can help us. Help yourself, even. What makes you think I'm going to help you? Athena asked. They tugged against David's hands, and the Natural's grip grew tighter. How do you know I won't blow you up, or burn you to ashes right now? Because you couldn't, David said from behind her ear. Your body is adapting to your true nature, but it still needs time to heal. Time you haven't given it. Endurian does want the best for you, you know. She knows where you're from, Athena. What you are. She knows about all things, including beings that created you. The form you're intended to take in the realm in which you should reside. Besides, Sherbet shrugged, you don't want to hurt us. Because like Raymond, you're too convinced that this isn't really us. You think that we could be cured. And beyond that, if you killed us, you wouldn't know how to reopen a portal, would you? You wouldn't be able to get Jamie back. Athena stopped struggling. They thought of Jamie alone in the darkness at the end, surrounded by those terrible things, deafened by that screeching. Why should I even believe you? What if he's not there? Sherbet took a few steps forward and crouched to look into the youth's eyes. Are you willing to take that chance, Athena? Are you willing to risk leaving them there? Athena looked at the ground. Sherbet grabbed his chin and turned Athena's face to look at them. Answer me, Athena. Are you? Athena swallowed. No, she said softly. That's what I thought, Sherbet nodded, taking a step back and releasing them. At that moment, Seven appeared in the doorway. Athena's shove had clearly caused some damage to one of his legs, and he was limping badly. Piston in his ankle pumped into the open air, and the foot dragged uselessly where it had been disconnected. Sherbet held up a hand to silence the machine before he even spoke. Besides, where would you go? Easton piped up from the table. My mother isn't going to take you in after what you did to Jamie. Raymond's dead, and we have means of dealing with Will. They paused for a moment, waving their hand in the air. You definitely don't need to worry about Haley. Not to mention those therapists of yours. Athena finally looked away from Sherbet. Martin? What have you done to him? We paid him and his boyfriend a visit, David scoffed. Their house could really give Raymond's a run for his money in the housing market. Athena pictured Ray's home, all ash and stone. He pictured the broken bodies of Martin and Emmanuel alongside Ray's. Joked back a sob. So here's how this is going to play out, Athena. Sherbet turned the gun over in their hand, the metal gleaming in the firelight. You have two options. You can tuck that little tail of yours between your legs and go back to your room. You can play nice and help us, and when the time comes, you'll do what's best for yourself and for Jamie and for Endirian, and you're going to help us open that portal. Sherbet leaned forward and grabbed a chunk of Athena's tangled hair. Or you can fight us like you are now, and we will lock you in a cage like the feral, filthy, monstrous animal you really are until we need you. At which point, we will do whatever it takes to open that rift. The fire in Athena's eyes vanished, replaced instead by pure fear of the chemist before them. You're going to choose the first option, aren't you? Sherbet said gently. Athena nodded as best they could, with Sherbet's fingers in their hair, holding them in place. Good. That's what I thought. Sherbet nodded. They looked up at David, who released Athena. The youth fell to their knees with a grunt, their tail wrapping around them. And in case you get any ideas, Seven has been given the task of keeping you in the grounds of Bancroft House. You know how dedicated he is to completing his tasks. Athena nodded again, massaging their forearms where David had been gripping them. Get out of my sight, Athena, Sherbet growled. Consider this as strike 2.